Hi, this is Evelyn Clark, and you're listening to Matthew Shapiro and the Six Wheels Consulting Disability Podcast.
Sweet.
Welcome to the Sixth Wheels Consulting Podcast, dialoguing disability and discussing difference, inclusion, and all abilities in today's world. Now here are your hosts, Matthew Shapiro and Bob Nolly.
Oh, welcome back. Welcome back. You found your way, and we're glad you did. This is the Six Wheels Consulting Disability Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Nolly. Hey there. Here comes Santa Claus. Here comes Santa Claus. And my buddy, Matthew Shapiro. Matthew, how are you?
Hello, Bob. I don't know if I consider myself good old St. Nick, so to speak, but thank you for that introduction.
Wait a minute. We agreed last time that you would drive the sleigh and I would pull the sleigh. And we thought that would be much more suitable for both our skills there.
Okay, that works.
I don't know. You know, this whole thing of being evergreen, trying to remember that, you know, that this can be listened to at any time of year. We should behave. Let's make a seat here at the table. Hold on here.
Okay.
I'll get a chair. Hold on. Yeah, this is
Okay.
fine. We have company today. Thanks. And she looks comfy now.
Yes.
Our guest, who you know, is currently an MS student in the Community Development Grad Group and is a graduate TA. Oh, I need one of those now. A graduate TA at UC Davis. And she's doing her thesis work on the effects of recent Medicaid regulation changes on Camp Hill communities. And we'll have to ask her what they are. Tell her more about this. Those are therapeutic residences for adults with developmental disabilities that exist around the world. She's also going to tell us a little bit about Heartbeat Life Sharing. I'll mark that. Heartbeat Life Sharing, a Camp Hill community in northern Vermont, which acts as her case study to explore these policy effects on everyday living, because this is where she lived as an AmeriCorps volunteer from 2015 to 16. She's been connected to Heartbeat through her uncle's own care journey for over a decade, and she really enjoys the idea of a lifelong relationship to Camp Hill communities, disability advocacy, and policy research. She's our kind of person.
Yes.
Folks, please welcome to the program, Odile Carroll. Odile, how are you, ma'am?
I am great. How are you all doing?
Okay, so you're not even in UC Davis today. You're on the shores of Lake Tahoe.
I am on the shores of Lake Tahoe. I finished grading a couple days ago, and this is my holiday present to myself. So I'm going to be doing some skiing here. Yeah.
Well done. As soon as I get done here today, I will be grading as well. So I know the feeling. I can empathize.
I'm so
100%.
sorry.
Yeah, I know. It's fine. It's fine. Matthew, how did you guys run into each other?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Bob. So
that's why I'm here. Every day in and day out, that's why I'm here.
You tee me up for great questions. It's fantastic. So I actually met Odile through her father. I'm pretty sure that's how we were connected, if I remember right.
Yes.
I met her father at an event that I was at in Charlottesville, and he and I, while we were at this event, got to talking about housing options for people with disabilities. And he was like, oh, my daughter Odile works kind of in that space, and that is something that she is very much interested in exploring through her research. And you know, maybe she is somebody you should talk to, because Bob, as we've had conversations on the podcast before, you know, I am at the phase in my life where I'm looking, you know, always looking for housing opportunities, and you know, was looking for other people to connect with to know about options for housing opportunities. And so that's how Odile and I got connected. And since we have been connected, she and I on a regular basis will chat with each other about kind of our views on just disability policy, whether it be housing or how society sort of views people with disabilities. And so, you know, I figured it would be really good to sort of have one of those kind of same conversations that she and I have had on probably 2 or 3 separate occasions kind of over the phone. We thought it would be kind of cool to sort of take that and sort of have that same conversation here on the podcast, so that our wonderful listeners could kind of hear about the work that we're doing. She and I are working on some things together, actually, and just sort of have that conversation. So that's what led us to being here, all three of us together here today, and looking forward to a great conversation.
Well, kick it off. What would you like to talk about first? Do you want to talk about the projects you're working on together, or her research?
So Odile, let's kind of go into your research first, and then we'll kind of circle back to one. I want to have kind of a conversation about your research, the work that we're doing, and then kind of a global conversation around disability that we tend to always have and geek out about when we chat on a regular basis. Or actually, I would say I get more heated rather than geeking out. I get more heated and frustrated, but they will probably hear that as we continue on tonight. But tell us a little bit more about your work and how you got into the Camp Hill communities and exactly what are Camp Hill communities.
Right. I think I always appreciate my conversations with Matthew because I've been really introduced to the world of policy and disability advocacy and kind of the history of legislation related to disability through my work with Camp Hill communities. And so even just a few conversations I've had with Matthew have really been fascinating and valuable conversations that still continue to influence how I'm thinking about my thesis as I'm working on it, even though those might not be directly related. There's so much overlap. So,
and I did not pay her to say that, by the way.
No, you did not.
I think that's legal, even if you did.
Yes.
It's consulting, yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, so I come at these issues and conversations through the lens of being related to Camp Hill communities in many different ways. And Camp Hill communities are essentially, as I said in my bio, they're these therapeutic residences that were actually founded in Scotland in the 1930s by a German pediatrician who fled from World War II, from Nazi Germany, with many of his patients who were children who had disabilities, because obviously they were set to face persecution as a result of that. And so he fled to Scotland, which was kind of a neutral space, and set up a community that kind of operated as a care center, as like it's a therapeutic residence, but it's based on a kind of a home model of care. So and this model has maintained itself through the past 70, 80, 90 years. So they're essentially, each Camp Hill community looks different. Obviously, there's about 120 in the world right now. They came over to the U.S. in 1960. But they all share this kind of home-based model of care. So each community will have a number of houses, and in each house, there's a constellation of people who live there. Some have disabilities, some don't. Their families, their children, and there is this like rhythm to the day and rhythm to caring for each other and caring for the land, because many of these communities often have relationships to organic gardens or farms. That kind of sets the standard for the day, for the year, for the lifestyle in these spaces. So I connected to these Camp Hill communities through my uncle when I was 12 or 13. So first as a family member, and then I moved to one when I was, after I graduated from college, 2015. And that, obviously the ways in which Camp Hill seeks to advocate or tries to advocate for itself as a care option has really been, it's really just been an interesting thing for me to dive into, particularly in this moment since 2014. We're in this really kind of interesting and complicated moment with residential funding changes to Medicaid, which is kind of known in some communities as the final rule. And yes, how there are many, wonderful things that have come out of the final rule as a policy change, as a way to regulate care, and like residential options for the good, for the benefit of people seeking those options out. But there have been kind of these subtle ways in which care and care models get to be defined by the rule, and then ones that are defined within the rule's parameters get funding, and the ones that aren't threaten, or there's risk that they lose funding.
But Odile, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that also part of the problem though, right? Because there's not I mean, the ever-standing issue within the disability community is the fact that there are still not a ton of options as it relates to housing for people like me. You know, you and I have talked about Camp Hill communities for even me in particular, and how, you know, like I said, I'm looking for housing options. But after kind of thinking about it and talking about it even more, because of my desire to ideally sort of like have my own place and the lifestyle that I lead, we both sort of agreed maybe it wouldn't be the most ideal fit for somebody like me. But I guess I circle back to it and say, like, doesn't that rule then also hinder people because it even makes it somewhat more challenging to find other options for housing? Does that question make sense?
That question makes sense, and I think that that's in some ways kind of maybe accidentally, maybe not so accidentally, what they're doing is they're saying this rule is about giving people choice, right? Choice, inclusion, accessibility. These are all things that we really care about and should care about. But we're going to control the list of choices, essentially.
Right. If I can push back again, no, that's what I do. Even with the whole, it's funny that you use the words choice, inclusion, and opportunity, right? Because I would argue there's a lack of all of those things, particularly within housing.
Absolutely. No, I'm saying this is what people, this is what people purport to do. I'm not saying this is actually what's happening.
Sure. No, and I think that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's all ready to put, I mean, this rule stems from, and I go into this in my thesis, I do this basically kind of this history of legislation the past 100 years in the United States related to disability. And, this is one that comes out of a desire to regulate and standardize options so that people do have a rule book to follow to hopefully, or guidebook to follow, to then be able to increase options. And what Camp Hill, so what happens with that rule is they end up necessarily, I think, making it a lot harder for these more these state institutions, which unfortunately there are still a few that exist.
Yes. And there are still a couple in Virginia too.
Oh yeah.
Where I'm at.
Right. There's still a couple. Yeah, there's still several. And so this final rule is kind of in response to or attempting to make it even harder for these institutions to seek funding. And I think that's really good because I don't think that options should stay around. However, that puts a little bit of a bias on what their picture of the best option is, right? We already know there aren't enough options, and then to say that now we're even regulating what is out there, and in such a way that Camp Hill has been in the past few years at risk of being regulated out, because it is neither a state institution at all, but it's also not exactly what you and I have talked about when you think about options for yourself. It's also not trying to be an apartment in an urban setting that has some sort of support system for a person to live independently. And it's not saying, it doesn't present itself as better or worse than that option. It presents itself as an option for someone to choose. Just like, how I chose to live in intentional community for a year at Heartbeat. I don't think none of my other friends who graduated college would have made that choice, but there's no better, there's no.
Right. You also had that personal connection with your uncle, but I think that's like, this conversation always makes it's like, it's ironic, right? Because I think it's odd because I think that and I do a lot of work with a lot of these state entities that do the work, so I am not sort of being negative towards them in any way, but it's almost like they think they're doing right, and maybe they are, but yet even when they think they're doing right, there are so many loopholes and so many struggles with even just that. So that continues to make the housing options, one, there's not that many of them because there are not that many that are built, first off. And then if there are some that are built, there are ridiculous wait lists. So like, I know that doing the right thing, but it's almost like they're not doing the right. They're doing the right thing, but it's like, it's doing the right thing, but with caveats. Is that clear?
Yeah.
It's just weird.
No, I think that makes complete sense. And I think that, this kind of circles back to something that we've talked about a few times, which is that it's the difference between a right to access and redesigning the system, right? Like if you're just trying to add houses, add employees, add options without actually revamping the whole system of housing, then it's going to continue. There's going to continue to be shortage. There's going to continue to be wait lists, not enough funding, etc. So until you actually just design houses for everyone from the beginning, then
there's a like a cyclical cycle that you just continue to go in circles with, which makes it more challenging. Bob, do you have any questions so far?
Yeah, speaking of cycles, you and I were recording during the midterm elections, Matthew, and the point that we made during our discussion then was the fact that we talked about the fact that issues for the disability community didn't get as much attention as they would have wanted to during those elections. And now, of course, here we are headed down the barrel of the 2020 election coming up, and the regulations that we're speaking to here, is that upcoming election, is that good news or bad news for the disability community?
Odile, you want to go first?
I think I'll let you go first, actually.
Okay.
You're about 3,000 miles closer to DC than I am right now, so.
so this, and Odile, correct me if I'm wrong here, but so this final rule decision that Odile was referencing has been something that has been worked on for at least the last 5 years or so that I can remember.
Yeah, it was promulgated in 2014 with adjustments made in 2017. And then in 2017 to 2019, they gave deadlines to different communities and different models of care that I think the deadlines were either in 2020 extended to 2021 or 2021 to 2022. Yeah.
Right. So it's but see, so that even brings up another point, right? So it's they continue to kick the can down the road, so to speak, rather than, rather than coming up with concrete solutions. And Odile, if you disagree with my statement I'm making here, please say so and offer input. But it's almost, again, they keep sort of kind of kicking the can down the road to almost we're dealing with it, but we'll get a final solution on it later. And I think that is typical, Bob, to answer your question. This whole policy discussion around disability policy, particularly on a 2020 scale, again, do they take disability policy seriously? Do they take, and by they, I mean politicians, do they take disability policy seriously? And is it an issue that is front of mind? The perfect example I can think of is actually recently, presidential candidate Andrew Yang sort of came out with his, and Odile, I don't know if you've seen this, but he came out with his disability policy. And I've seen a lot of people from the disability community on Twitter saying, it's not really a disability policy that you're framing here. It's just a healthcare policy that you're slapping the word disability on and calling it your disability platform, when it's not a true and genuine disability platform. And so that to me highlights the lack of I guess seriousness around that whole issue. Odile, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that front, but that's definitely something that bothers me from a political standpoint, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, something that we have talked about, which is the ways in which the system continues to disenfranchise voters, particularly either voters with disabilities or who might be engaged in that world. The system continues to disenfranchise people financially in particular. And then when you think about politics being very financially driven in many ways, it makes sense in a twisted and and unproductive and bad way that these voices are not promoted. But there is this woman, and she's someone that I follow on social media, named Emma Layden, who I really appreciate what she does. But every week she does a little video on Fridays, I think it is, called Disability Diaries. And she's actually been doing profiles of the different candidates of the Democratic Party for the past year, when we originally had 400 to the number that we have now. So she's been profiling them.
Now.
Pardon?
I said only 200 now.
Only 200 now.
I went from 400 to 200.
So she's got her work cut out for her. No, but every Friday, she basically just does this deep dive into everybody's policy proposals and interviews that they've had, and tries to kind of capture these sound bites on what people are saying. What did Kamala Harris say about this? What's Joe Biden saying? What's Elizabeth Warren saying as it relates to disability? And she did bring up a similar point that you did just share, Matthew, about Andrew Yang. But overall, every time I watch them, I'm always really, I guess, more desensitized to it now. But predictably, there's usually a soundbite, but it's nothing comprehensive. It's nothing that centers this in conversation. It always feels like it's a little bit of an afterthought or an adage, that isn't kind of assuming that this isn't perhaps central in the voter's mind, central in the financer's mind. So I get the same impression, I think.
So can you share with our listeners, you said, is she on Twitter?
I think she's on Twitter. Yep.
Do you know her handle off the top of your head by chance?
It's just her name, so it's Emma, EMMA, and LAYDEN, Emma Layden.
I was looking her up as we were chatting, because I want to follow that now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because our listeners have probably picked up on the fact that that you have said you and I have talked on a regular basis. And so one of the other things, in addition to your work with Camp Hill and all the amazing work you're doing with your grad work and all of that.
Hey folks, we're going to stop right there. We'll come back and finish up the interview with Matthew and Odile in our next episode. But you have been listening to the Six Wheels Consulting Disability Podcast. This is Bob Nolly. Until next time.